Hi, this is Matt McDermott from Aptillon. I'm going to be talking to you about 5 query rules that I think every SharePoint geek should know. Really, these are classes of query rules that represent tools for improving findability in your environment, whether it's SharePoint on premises or SharePoint in Office 365. For each of our samples, we're going to come up with kind of our problem statements, like I want to promote some content when a user tries to search for it, or I want folks to see this when they search for that particular word or phrase. Or users just aren't searching the right way and we need to help them out. In this case, our first example is going to be better best bets, or what are known in SharePoint 2013 and 2016 as promoted results. For this first query rule, we want to demonstrate promoted content. And for that purpose, I'm going to use the scenario where our training department has developed a course for SharePoint, and we want to promote that to our users. So we've created a little snippet here with our help of our art department that says that we've got SharePoint classes on February 29th in Austin. And so if they click on that, it's going to take them to the training site where they can then sign up for the class. So I'm going to grab the URL to this, and we'll go back to our search site. We'll go into site settings and down into query rules. And then we have to choose a result source upon which this rule will act. In our case, we want it on that everything page. So we're going to choose local SharePoint results. And we're going to choose new query rule. I'm going to call this SharePoint training. And I'm going to choose an advanced query text match. The query contains one or more of these phrases, so we'll put in here SharePoint and a semicolon delimited, so I'll put a semicolon there, and then we'll put SPS, WSS, and maybe they really need training, so we'll put in MOS. Now I don't really care where that phrase shows up, but I do care about this add promoted result. So this is going to be SharePoint training. And the URL is going to be the URL to that banner. Now, if all we did here was put in a description, then they would see the phrase SharePoint training with it linked to that URL and the description. But instead, I want to do render the URL as a banner instead of as a hyperlink, and choose save. Also, since we're holding the class on the 29th, I'm going to set this for 2/28 of 2017, so that after the 28th, this rule will no longer be in effect, and it won't advertise the fact that the class has already taken place. So I go back to this site now, and we do a search for SharePoint. And we get our banner. So these will always show at the top. Promoted results always show at the top, but it still preserves that link to the training site. So I'm happy with that, and that is our first query rule, which is a promoted result to advertise additional content that's available to your end users if you search on a specific phrase. So in our better best bet example, we used a promoted result. And we have a URL that went directly to the content, and then we showed that content as a banner because the content was prepped to be shown inside the display template for the best bet. And we also set a publishing date so that that content would also expire. In the next example, we're going to try to find out when a user searches for something specific and we want to focus that search on specific properties. In other words, they're using keywords that we want to associate with specific kinds of content. You'll also hear people say that they're wasting time using metadata and they still can't find anything, or you may say that your users aren't searching the right way. But in either case, what we're going to do now is do a targeted property query based on the end user's search. In this scenario, we're going to be searching for people that know something about SharePoint. I'm going to enter the query of SharePoint and then go to the People tab. And I'll notice here that I have some people that have Skills SharePoint as well as SharePoint in their job title. But then I also have people that have SharePoint in their job title, but nothing in their skills or their Ask Me About. Now, Ask Me About is an opt-in field that the end user fills in. And so what I want to do is target those people that have indicated Ask Me About SharePoint, and we'll get them in a query rule, and we'll present that right at the top so that we can help people find experts who are willing to answer questions about SharePoint. The way we do this is with a query rule. So site settings, query rules, and in this case, we're searching on local SharePoint people. And I'm going to create a new query rule, and we're going to call this one expertise. I don't care what people are searching for, so I'm going to remove the condition because this is going to fire if there's a match. I'm going to add a result block, and I'll explain what a result block is in a moment visually, but just suffice to say this is a set of results that it's going to float inside the exact results for the query that you entered. And I'm entering a title of people who know about the subject term, the term that you're searching for, in our case, SharePoint. So I'm going to launch the query builder, and I'm going to execute this search against local people results. And I don't need this subject term because we're going to completely change the query for our end user. And you can use this little property checkbox, property dropdown, while you're getting used to constructing your own queries. And in my case, the first thing I'm looking for is responsible. So we're going to go to responsibilities, contains a value of our subject terms. And I'm going to add that property filter. And then I'm going to add skills as well, because I want it to be both, I want it to check both fields. So we'll add skills as well. Now you need to amend this query just a little bit. In fact, what I'm going to do is take out these intervening curly braces so that it starts with a curly brace and a question mark. Now that's important because that means that this query won't fire if subject terms is null. We've got responsibilities or skills matching the subject terms. So if I test the query, I should get no results here because we have no subject term. I go to the test page, choose show more, and I can put in my subject terms. So let's put in, I don't know, SharePoint. We'll test our results, and we get results back. Now notice that Hank is not present there because he didn't have it in his skills. I do know that Hank knows something about mud though. So if I test that query, I get Hank back. So therefore, somewhere in either the responsibilities field or the skills field, he has mud, and that makes him the perfect match for that query. I'm going to choose OK, and I want to make this look a little bit different. So there's two things that I'm going to do. The first one is I'm going to change the result type to people intent. This gives me a nice horizontal small view. But the other thing I'm going to do is change this result block is always shown above the core results. Now I do this for demonstration purposes because I want it to show up right at the top. But the default is important to recognize this block is ranked within the core results, and it may not show. What that means is that it floats within the relevance of the other results that are in the results page, and if it ends up on page 10, then it may not show. So a lot of times you're not going to want to pin all of this stuff to the top because it may not be the most relevant result that you're trying to present. But in the case of our demos, I am going to choose this so that it makes it easier for you to see that we found this thing. I'm also going to change this to 4. That way we get 4 people back at most. I'll choose Save. I'll go back to my site. I'll search for SharePoint. And I'll go to the People tab. And once I'm on the People tab, what I should see at the top is my experts after just a moment. Let's try it one more time here. There they are. So notice it says people who know about SharePoint. So we found people who, if I go to Happy here, we come here and on Happy's skills, she has SharePoint. So therefore, I'm finding people who are actually opting in to answer questions about it. And if you're wondering what happened to Hank, he's right there under mud because he has asked me about mud fetching and swimming. So that's a way to allow your end users to be able to search for something, and you can focus, you can target that search to specific properties inside those search results. So in our property query example, we used a result block. We took out the condition because we wanted to apply anytime there was a match. Then we used that colon as a contains query for skills and responsibilities. And here is the exact query that we used. Now, if you had other properties you wanted to search on, you would simply swap out the word skills and responsibilities for the managed property that you were interested in. Now, what if you're working in a large organization and you do a search for somebody, or you do a search for a user profile, but you want to return the users that are in your department? In other words, whatever department you're in, you want the people who are in your department to be more relevant or in a separate result block from the other users. Also, this is a way that you can make the end results a little bit more personal because you're using information about the asker to drive the query that's going to return them results. You can also help users find people in their department to help them. And the way that we do this is using something I call a user query. So in this scenario, we're going to be looking for people who are in my department. If I do that same search that I did before for SharePoint, and jump over here to the People tab. Assume that we're a very large organization. Now, if I'm running this query as Ruby down here, and Ruby is in the Search Services department. So what we can notice is that there are other people that have SharePoint on their profile, but they're not all in Search Services. For instance, Hank here is in SharePoint Services, and so is Cheyenne. Jolie is down in information technology. So what I want to do is find somebody that's in Ruby's department and have that expert show up here. And so we're going to use a little bit of what we know about Ruby to construct a query to help her find people close by. I'm going to go into Site Settings, and I'm going to go into Query Rules. And I'm going to choose our People Result Source. And what you'll notice right away is that I did disable the rule, the expertise rule. You don't have to do that, but I do that just to make the demos a bit more clear. I'm going to choose a new query here. And we're going to call this one Users in Department. Again, I really don't care what the query is. What I do care about is that the information about the end user is added to the query for the result block. So I'm going to find users near you. Now, obviously, it's not geographically near you, but it's departmentally near you. And then we're going to change the query. So there's properties that tell me a little bit about the user based on their user profile. And the first thing I'm going to look for is the department. The department contains something that I know about the user. Now, this dropdown is not perfect. It has the name of the user who runs the query. But I'm going to show you that as long as you know the property names, you can just come in here and change them. So in this case, we're looking for the user's department. So we use user.department as the search term. So now I've got whatever the subject term is, plus the end result has to have a department value that matches the user's department. Now, if I do just that, then if Ruby's user profile is part of the result set, then she will show up too. And clearly, she's looking for help. So we're not going to do that. We're going to exclude Ruby. And we can do that by grabbing the user profile global unique ID. And then we're going to make sure that it does not equal the current user's user profile.GUID. So by executing this query, we will exclude Ruby, but we'll include everybody else. So we can do that. You come in here. The search terms are obviously automatically ANDed together. And then I can come over here and make sure that it's those two things. And that the user's globally unique ID does not match. And then the last thing I need to do is make sure that this query is coming from local people results. I can test that query. It brings back Jolie. Jolie is a good example of someone who's not in my department. If I come over to the test page and I do a search term here for SharePoint, I should see everybody but Ruby. So I test that. It works. I can check for, I don't know, recovery and test that, and it brings back folks. The main thing here is I'm looking to see that it does not bring back Ruby, and it doesn't, so I'm happy with that. So I've got users near you. We're going to change that one setting I told you about earlier. We're going to make sure it shows up at the top, and we're going to grab our users here and choose a people intent item because I like the way that looks. And we can choose OK. Come back here. Now remember before, we typed in SharePoint, and on the people page, we got people. But now what we get is people who are in Ruby's department. So remember, Ruby's department is search services. So if we go to people, we've got users near you who know SharePoint. And notice that both Kobe and Wrigley are part of Ruby's department. So she knows two people close by that she can contact. But if I change users, and here I'm logged in as OSO, and I search people for SharePoint, I should get a different group of people. And in this case, he doesn't have anybody in his department that can help him out, but he's in sales. So let's try marketing. And there you go. OSO found Ralph, who knows marketing, in his department. So this is a simple way for you to allow end users to find people close to them by using a structured query that pulls from a little information about the end user who's executing the query and applies it as a global query. So in our user query example, we did another result block. We took away the condition because we're going to apply this to any search. And then we use the user.property syntax to get the information about the person asking the question, the person who is executing the query. In our case, we use the user.department and the user.profile GUID to be able to tailor that query to be able to help people find people close to them. In this next example, we want to do a swap. When a user searches for this word, they actually meant this other word. Or you work in a company where they use a lot of jargon, but that jargon doesn't show up in the document. So the TPS report isn't called a TPS report, or at least the letters TPS aren't found in it. Again, this comes back to our searchers, our users aren't searching the right way. They're using company jargon instead of using actual terms that are in the documents that they're searching for. So I call this a user intent query, and this one is a super cool way of helping your end users find content and really tailoring the search experience for your company. If you were to meet me at a conference and you saw a search presentation that I did, you might ask me for my PowerPoint file on SharePoint Search, but you wouldn't usually ask it that way. You would ask for it by the term that we use in the industry called deck. A SharePoint deck, SharePoint Search deck, is the same as a PowerPoint file, and SharePoint knows that. So if I do a search for the word deck, SharePoint will remove the word deck and do a search for SharePoint Search that is found in PowerPoint files. Likewise, SharePoint knows what a doc is. And so if I do the same search for SharePoint Search Doc, I find the governance plan because it has the term SharePoint Search in it and it's a Word document. Now you'll notice that it also ran the query against all sources using that Word doc, and there is a Word doc here that is not in a Word document. But this is called a user intent query. The user intended to search for documents. So in our organization, we produce these little video clips, and So if I go to Ruby, if I type Ruby here and jump over to videos, I'll see that I have these videos that show up for Ruby, but in our parlance, in the jargon of our organization, we call these flicks. And if I search for flick, what I should find is I should find Ruby videos, but instead I just find the one deck on how to create a flick. And that's not very helpful. So what I want to do is create a user intent query that results in the discovery of video content when we use the keyword flick. I'm going to go to my site settings. I'm going to go to query rules, and I'm going to choose my local SharePoint results. I'm going to create a new query rule, and I'm going to call this one video intent. Now in this case, I'm going to choose query contains an action term. The action terms are going to be semicolon delimited, so I'm going to choose flick and flicks plural, and then filk because I always spell it wrong. And then I'm going to come down and add a result block. Now notice in the query variables section here, it says the search box queries the original query. That's Ruby flick. The subject terms are the unmatched terms. That's Ruby. The action term is the matched terms. For example, flick. So now I'm going to change this to video results for whatever we were searching for. That would be Ruby. And then I'm going to launch the query builder, and I'm going to change from the query's original source to local video results. Now when I do the test query, I find all of the Ruby videos. So with that done, I can choose OK. I'm going to change this to, let's say, 4 items, and instead of using the out-of-the-box display template, we'll go ahead and choose a video item to make it look good. So we'll choose OK there. And now we've got that set up, I can come back up here and choose save, and I can go back to my search, and I can search for Ruby flick. And it says video results for Ruby. And this video intent item is nice because it gives us a nice presentation of that video. But let me show you what we can do with the more link, because right now there's nothing else down here. So let's go to the video tab, and let's take Ruby flick off of here. And now what I can do is copy this URL and go back to my rule. I'm going to edit my rule, and in my result, go into settings. I'm going to add this more link. And so watch how we do this. Now, if I do nothing else but leave it like this with k equals Ruby, then that would force that search result to always be Ruby, which would be kind of silly. So instead, we're going to use the subject terms. I'm going to go to the end and place it right there. So now I'm going to send them to the video results page, and I'm going to pass that subject term so that it forces the result to occur as soon as they switch tabs, which is what everybody expects. So here we go again. Ruby flick. Hit the button. It says here are my local video, or here are my video results for Ruby. Then down here it says show more. Click on show more, and it takes us to the video results tab with just Ruby in the list. This is a really nice way to get your end users moving between tabs, moving from one search vertical to another. It kind of helps them understand how the user interface is built too. So for our user intent query, we did another result block, but this time we used a query contains an action term. And then we chose the action term to use, and then we changed the query and added the more link that allowed them to move from one search vertical to another inside our search user interface. Our last example helps users find what you consider to be the most important content. It's another way to possibly promote content. It's the way that I'm going to teach you is kind of like using a sledgehammer to solve the problem. But I want to show you just how much control you have over ranking results if you choose to use it. This is called a content boost or a boost query. In this scenario, we have a really important list that contains information we want our end users to find. So if I do a search for Austin, what I see is I've got some documents here. I've got how to implement search. I've got people. Oh, here's our frequently asked questions list. That's what I want people to find. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the shortcut to this list, and we're going to create a ranking rule that promotes the content from that list. So just remember that Lumia and how to show up at the top right now. I'm going to go to Site Settings and down into Query Rules, and we're going to call this one, let's call this one Content FAQ Boost. FAQ Boost. Now again, I don't care what the condition is. I just care that my query gets executed. So I'm going to choose this time, change ranked results by changing the query. I'm going to go off our original source. And in this case, what I'm looking for is anytime any of the content comes from that list, which would mean that the path to this item contains that FAQ list. So I'm going to say any of these items that are on FAQ star. And I'm also going to make sure that it's important enough that it shows up in the title. In other words, the word Austin would have to show up in the title. And so this is where we're going to enter our search terms in there as well. So if it shows up in the title, and if it's in our FAQ list, then I want to do something special here. And so this is the sledgehammer. I'm going to come in here and put in the question mark to make sure that if this is only going to execute if it's not null. And I'm going to do an X rank, and I'm going to do a content boost of 100 for any content that matches this query. So I've got my X rank content boost equals 100. I've got the path, and then I've got the title, search terms. So let's put some quotes around this. And let's test that query. Then let's go up here to test, show more. Type in Austin, test the query, and notice how do I change my password is above Lumia sells out. So we've got our FAQ hit showing up above our Lumia sells out. That's what we need. So I'm going to choose save. And then we'll come back to our search center and do that same search for Austin. And we've altered the rank of the results in that list when it matches something in the title, which means it's pretty darn important. Now, as I said, this is kind of a sledgehammer. If that list was as important as you say, then after a week or two of people searching for things and finding them, they'll ultimately show up on this first page just through the nature of how SharePoint learns about what's important to your organization. But if you need to alter that, if you need to force these results, then that's one of many ways to use XRank to get the results to show up at the top. So for this example, we changed the rank of results by changing the query. We used a query contains the terms, but when we use those search terms, we also added the XRank property to force a promotion of 100 to anything that matched our title. And like I said, this is usually not necessary, but it does demonstrate a very powerful capability of query rules. So I wanted to leave you with a few references. The first one is my search class from Pluralsight. It's still relevant. It's related to SharePoint 2013, but still totally works in SharePoint 2016. There's also a fantastic site by one of my friends, Agnes Molnar, called Search Explained, and she also has Search Explained on Yammer. If you have search questions or you're interested in additional search content, great source. If you want to learn how to write your own queries, Michael Svensson has written an amazing book called SharePoint Search Queries Explained. Fantastic resource, totally worth the money. And then finally, an oldie but a goodie, my SharePoint 2013 Search Display Templates and Query Rules from SharePoint Conference 2014. 75 minutes just on query rules and display templates. Lots of fun. I'd like to thank you for your time and watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please contact Aptillon, and we'd be more than happy to help you find the information you need and get some great consulting resources.